Hello, and welcome to the fourth annual Transform Challenging Behavior online conference. You did it! Yay! Not only did you register, but you opened your email and you clicked on the link and you're here and you set aside the time. It's just like we're at an in-person conference at a convention center or a crowded hotel conference room. And we're crammed in to see one of those really popular speakers to talk about a very important topic, which is, of course, challenging behavior. Except you didn't have to spend a lot of time or money or travel to get here. You didn't have to push through the crowds in the hallway or stand in the registration line. And you didn't have to pay a lot of money for your coffee. Wait, you have your beverage, right? Go get your beverage, get comfy, download your workbook, or at least get a pen and paper or notebook or journal and settle in and get comfortable. Because this is going to be good. And we're going to have a great time together. In this video, we're talking with Dana Abraham about getting to the root cause of challenging behaviors in your classroom. Now, you might have learned that you should document children's behavior when there's challenging behavior. And some programs use the ABC method to figure out the cause. Those charts, where you write down what happened, you write down what happened before the behavior, that's the antecedent A, you write down the behavior itself, B, of course, and then C, you write down the consequent, so the ABC method. The problem is a lot of times it just feels like
I was what I call an out of the box kid, a kid that didn't quite fit in. Um, I was always in trouble with my mom. My friends would say that I was grounded more days than I was free, and I was always just pushing the envelope quite a bit. I also was a sibling of a very, very explosive brother who's bipolar. So I have the experience of being a sibling of a child that has, really challenging behavior and seeing what the ripple effect has been in his life without the support, even though he had amazing parents that loved him. And then when I became a teacher, my favorite kiddos were the ones that came with a paper trail behind them, and the ones that all the teachers whispered about in the teachers lounge. They were just my favorite. There was something special about them that they had my heart, and it was easy for me to really connect with them, understand where they were coming from, and have breakthroughs with them like no other teacher was able to. And so when I became a parent, I was like, I got this. I can totally do this. And my firstborn son was a challenge, and he pushed all the limits, all the norms that I thought were quote unquote normal. I put all my best practices in place, and I still was really struggling. So by the time he was in second grade, so he was about 7 years old, he was suspended more days than he was in school. And there was this one day where I got a call from the school, and I was 9 months pregnant, went to the school, and he's in this glassed in room, and he's just banging, and he's acting like basically like the caged animal that they're kind of treating him like, but they didn't know anywhere else to put him to keep him safe and staff safe. And the police were there, and the whole school staff was there. And the principal basically took me into her office and she said, "Don't bring him back till you figure out what's wrong with him." And I knew right then and there that I had to do something different. I could see that he was going on the path that I saw my brother go through, and that I saw so many of my friends who were incredibly brilliant but creative and didn't fit in a box go through when I was growing up. And so I knew I needed to kind of step in. I quit teaching, brought him home, and I'd love to say that it was perfect because I homeschooled him, but it wasn't. I didn't want to be a homeschooler. Um, and he didn't want me to be his teacher. So there was definitely battles there. But I made it my goal that I wanted him to not all of the different things that they might say, and they don't actually mean any of those words.
Mm.
And so when you build that connection, those words start to change. And they start to change to, "I need you. I'm upset. I'm sad. I miss mom," right? Or something like that. They can start to verbalize what they're really upset about. So that's um so for the emergency plan, we're basically doing like, what am I going to do And what will they do and what will others do? So you're kind of making a plan for the whole scenario. So if this kid is, you're making an emergency plan because you've seen the behavior before. So if a kid has an aggressive meltdown where they're hitting, they're kicking, they're throwing chairs, I know that
Mm,
students can get that aggressive.
yeah.
So if you know that's what's happening, then you're going to go ahead and make a plan. What am I going to do? What is the teacher assistant going to do? What is the child going to do? And in that case, you're probably not going to expect much of the child, right?
Mm,
So the child is going to, process their emotions, or they're going to be upset. And what are we going to do? We're going to remove as much as possible. We're going to remove anything that he could throw. We're going to remove anything that he could hurt someone with. We're going to remove any of the children that are nearby, right? And this is like in the moment. And the main goal of an emergency plan is just safety, safety, safety. Like, how do you get everyone back to safety? And what happens when there's an emergency, we try to solve, we try to fix, we try to solve, we try to stop. And sometimes that just makes it last longer. Or
right,
we try to give ultimatums. Like, if you do that, I'm going to have to call your mom. And when you
right.
do that, it's just escalating, escalating, escalating,
Yeah.
instead of just already knowing what you're going to say, what you're going to do, and how you're going to hold space for that kid, and then keep everyone else safe during that moment. And so I think the important part is what others are going to do, right?
Mm,
So if you have a child who really struggles in your classroom, or you have multiple children, it's never too early to teach children about our emotions and about how we can, as Dan Siegel calls it, you flip your lid, right? And
right.
you're no longer in control of kind of what's happening. And so there's no reason to not teach kids that at circle time, or to read books about, I used to love the book When Sophie Gets Angry. I think that's what it's called, really, really
Yeah,
angry
we
or
have
something.
another speaker who's going to show us that book and talk
I
about it. So I
loved
love
that book
that.
when I
That's
was when I was teaching. But teaching the kids, if you see, like, what are dangerous behaviors, what are unsafe behaviors, and teaching the kids that that child is not bad, because the other kids change the child, but instead we're trying to change the way they communicate what they need so that others can hear them. And we're trying to change the way that we perceive them. And we're trying to change how we understand them, but we're not trying to change who they are innately inside. Then, yeah, they're a challenge. And they're going to push us to be better, to do better, and to think outside the box and come up with solutions that generations before us haven't come up with.
mm, hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
why I use that term. And I use the term out of the box kids. I love
Mm,
that term. But what I found is a lot of people aren't ready for that. They don't really know if they have an out of the box kid yet. But boy, when I ask people, if you had to describe your child with one word, what would it be? They say hard,
mm,
challenging. And
hmm.
sometimes they'll say difficult, but I like challenging, because it is hard to push yourself to think differently. It is hard to step outside of your comfort zone. It is hard to meet them where they're at, and to not listen to what society's telling you about what that kid is going to become if you don't fix it when they're 3.
Mm, hmm.
And so I like that word because I think
Yeah.
it challenges us to really think outside the box.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your
You're welcome.
perspective on that. And it's not something certainly that all of the tens of thousands of us at this conference are going to agree on, and that's
Right.
okay. And I think though the point I'm really taking from you is like, it's not just like saying like, oh, I'm not going to use a phrase like bad behavior. I'm going to spin it to like a little more positive or neutral. You're really like taking a bigger paradigm shift in some way and saying
Hmm.
like, you know what, these are the children that are going to help us to really shift our thinking
Hmm.
for probably the greater good of all
Yeah.
involved. So
Yeah. And I
um
believe that their thing that is challenging to us is the very thing that is probably going to help them change the world, right? If
mhm,
honed, if used correctly. I mean, I Hulk is a perfect example. I know he's fictional, but that powerfulness that he has inside of him, he can crush buses, or he can save buses. Like, he can
mm,
do either
right,
or.
right,
And so it's all about how it's perceived and how it's really molded. And that's our
right.
job as educators, is to guide our kids, and not to get them to fit into what we think they should look like or act like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, I want to move on, because I think, some of what we've been speaking about so far, or a decent amount of it, is sort of like, having your emergency plan, being able to ride the storm using your anchor, and maybe some thought shifts, and knowing what everyone's going to do. And I know you really help folks to uncover the root behind challenging behavior and really make a plan that's like way beyond damage control, but really helping the child get their needs met, and learn and grow and shift what's happening. So obviously, you can't take us through your whole method in this short amount of time, but can you give us a bit of a taste on like, how do we, understand the behavior and look to make more of like a prevention or growth plan moving forward?
I love that. So if you don't mind me going back to my doodles, I can
Yeah, I love your
share.
doodle.
Okay, awesome. All right, so all of our plans have 4 key pillars, and you've heard me talk about a lot of them already. So I just want to put them on here so you guys can see them. So the very first part you've heard me talk about, it's about you. It's about you being the one that's able to provide moments of safety, you being the one that's guiding and teaching, you being the one that's doing the deep work to figure out what's under the behaviors. And so that's the first piece, is that thought shift and anchors. The next piece is connection. And the next piece is understanding, which is the part you're asking about. And then the final piece is empowerment. And what I find is a lot of times the tactics and the strategies we use 1 or 2 or 3 of these, but rarely use all of them. So all of our plans have a sprinkle of each of these pillars, because I believe that you need all of these to make forward progress. And so for an ahead of the moment plan is, if we look at that journey again, we talked about emergency and we talked about ride the storm. The next one would be something that we call an in the moment plan. And this is where you've talked to the kid ahead of time, right? So now it's not just about you staying calm, but it's also now about de-escalating. And so creating a place in your room that is a safe place or a calm corner, and all of those things that I know so many of the great teachers that are here are already using a lot of those strategies. And so it's having that plan ahead of time of, again, it's your thought swap, it's you getting calm, and then it's you getting down on their level. What are you going to say? And you're going to take a break, right? So that's the do, is everyone's going to take a break. The child's going to go to their safe place, and maybe you need a break as well. But we're taking a break. We're not trying to solve the problem in the moment again. And we are not allowing the behavior. That is probably the thought that's going to come up in your mind that's going to make you want to jump in the moment, is because you're going to hear, well, I can't let him do that. It's like, I have to teach them. They have to learn they can't act this way. Absolutely, but not in the moment, right?
Right.
So that brings us to ahead of the moment. And so that's what we're going to talk about here, which is what you're asking about, is how do you make a plan that actually starts to change the behavior or change the situation, change the way you're communicating. And one of the core pieces of an ahead of the moment plan is starting to create, you have to do these things we call celebration huddles. You asked, how do we build connection? So if we're always talking about the problem, then it's going to be really hard to get kids to feel connected. It's going to be really hard for them to feel like they're going to feel so bad, like they're always doing everything so wrong. So we really want to build up those moments now by talking about the things that are going well. And that can be at circle time, that can be as a group, it can be in small group, it can be individual, but you're really having these moments of, let's celebrate things that are going well. So that's the connection piece, is this celebrate huddle.
Is that supposed to say ahead of the moment plan? I don't
Yes,
want
it
anyone to
is.
get confused. Okay, great.
You're
Just
so
check.
good. So this is the celebrate huddle. And then for understanding, what you really want to do is you want to look back at this in the moment, what happened in the moment, and you want to do something that we call a spiral. So you start with the epicenter, the big blow up. You start in the middle and you say, okay, what happened before that, before that, before that? And you're really looking at the whole picture and trying to backtrack it as far as possible. So I know I've talked about this before on, the conference before, but I'll quickly just
No,
kind of
we
give
want
it.
it again,
Okay,
please.
good. So if you can picture a penny funnel or a wishing well, right? If you can picture a wishing well in the mall where you put a penny in and then it goes around. I used to play that game with my brother when I was growing up. And what I found is we would play this game to see who could get it down the furthest, but not push it in the hole. And the further down the penny went, the harder it was to catch it. But if you caught it too early, then you didn't win the game. So it was really about that balance of finding the right
Mm,
tipping point. And so when you look at this spiral, the behavior is that epicenter of that big wishing well. And imagine the behavior spinning down just like the penny. And so when you backtrack it, I'm just going to zoom in. This is the fun part about this little thing. Okay. So let's say this one is hitting. It may even be more than that. It may just be a fight, like a big knockdown, drag out, right? Screaming. What are you guys going to do? What is the agreed plan that you'll do if it doesn't work? Like, if this plan, you try it and it doesn't work, what will you do instead? So you're already coming up with the what if, because a lot of times what we find is parents and teachers will say, well, that's never going to work because they're just going to XYZ. Great, make an oops plan for if they X, Y, and Z. Go ahead and make a plan for what you'll do if that happens, because the more prepared you are, the less it takes you off guard, the more you're there to help them through the situation. And you're practicing this as much as you can ahead of time. So now you're building skills. Now you're helping them be able to build the skills they need, and you're able to share the information. You're saying, I notice when, so I wonder if, let's make a plan. Like, that's kind of the script we like to use for these ahead of the moment plans.
mm.
And then you make it really visual, so it's there, it's easy for them to use in the moment. I mean, it's the in the moment of the ahead of the moment. I know that gets really confusing, but
Yeah, no, that
you
makes sense, I
know what I
think.
mean. Not,
I
yeah.
do, yeah.
So you're practicing ahead of time and you're kind of coming up with that plan, having an oops plan, but don't throw it out if it goes wrong. Instead, you just come back and have another one of these huddles and you talk about what went well, what didn't. Let's tweak it. Keep 80% of the plan and get rid of 20%. You're just making one tiny tweak with the kid, right?
Hmm.
Any questions about ahead of the moment?
No, that's great. I guess here, I have an idea, Dana, if you'll
Uh-huh.
bear with me on this. It made me, as you were speaking and you were doing the spiral part, think of a little girl that I worked with when I was a special ed teacher, where I think, even though obviously we weren't trained in your method, we kind of did something like that.
Mhm.
So tell me if this kind of fits, and then I feel like I'll know if I really got it. So
Okay.
Annalise